I'm Signal SCV Deputy Managing Editor Perry Smith. Here with, to my right, is Signal Business Editor Steve Kiggins, Executive Editor Jason Schaff, 25th Congressional District Candidate Bryan Caforio, and political reporter Crystal Dorn. Thank you for joining us today, Bryan, for this Signal Editorial Board meeting.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we're creating these informal conversations with the candidates for the 25th Congressional District so we can have an open-ended discussion on the issues that matter most to our audience. Some of the questions have come from our discussion, others from social media, from your potential constituents. We know we're not going to get to all the issues, but we want to touch on some of the ones that we hear about the most. But let's start with an easy one. What's the number one takeaway you want voters to have about Bryan Caforio?
Well, first, thank you for having me here. Thank you for doing this and bringing everybody in. I think it's really important and give an opportunity for voters to learn about the different candidates. For me, what I want voters to know is that I am here fighting for this community. I think that what is happening right now in Washington with the dysfunction, with the chaos, has real effects here locally. And we need someone in office who is going to stand up and represent this community and defend us from the attacks being launched on California right now by this administration. I've been fighting for this community, and I look forward to continue doing it for many years to come into the future.
What's the biggest threat, you say, about this administration for us living here in Santa Clarita?
I mean, there's so much. This president has launched an attack on California. And so you see it with this tax bill that just happened, which singles out California and other blue states like it for worse tax treatment. With the offshore drilling, that he is attacking California while he's giving red state governors waivers. With health care, you know, the Trump Care bill, which Congressman Knight voted for, 57,000 people in this congressional district would lose their health care if that had gone through. 310,000 people in this district have pre-existing conditions. That is a lot of families in this district who are at risk because of Trump Care and the people who enable that. With DACA and immigration, we have 5,000 DACA eligible people in our community whose families are at risk of being torn apart because of this president and his administration. And so on just so many different sides, we are under attack, and we need people who are going to stand up and defend us when those attacks come.
So, Bryan, how might your votes on the issues of the environment and gun control differ from your opponents in both parties?
Well, with regards to Congressman Knight, they would differ quite a bit. You all remember throughout the entirety of the 2016 campaign, Mr. Knight said repeatedly he didn't support the president, he didn't support the current president, but Donald Trump when he was running. He, of course, then told us on Election Day that actually he did support Donald Trump and made no bones about it. And since being in Congress, he has voted with President Trump more than all but 4 members in the House of Representatives. There are 435 people in Congress, and Steve Knight is a rubber stamp for Donald Trump more than all but 4 of them. I would not be a rubber stamp for this president. When Congressman Knight ran in 2014 on gun control, he filled out a written questionnaire. And he said, he was asked about taking dangerous weapons away from people with mental health issues. And it was a written response, so he had time to think about it. And he, opposed that. And he then said, I will never vote for a gun control measure as long as I'm in Congress. And he has been true to his word. He has never voted for any safety protections, and he, in fact, right now is out there co-sponsoring the concealed carry reciprocity bill, which would allow any person, you pick up your phone right there, Jason, you spend 5 minutes, go to Virginia, spend $60, you can get a concealed carry permit, and if that went through, you could carry that weapon in our community. That's what Congressman Knight wants. I don't. I support an assault weapons ban. We should get rid of assault weapons, bump stocks, silencers. I support a nationwide 14-day waiting period, which at the very least would save 1,000 lives a year simply by reducing the number of suicides. I support raising the age from 18 to 21. I support refunding the CDC so it can conduct the research necessary to get the scientific evidence to show what protections would save the most lives. I support having universal background checks so that if you have a mental health issue, if you are a suspected terrorist, if you are a domestic abuser, you should not be able to purchase a weapon and carry it in our community. So on all of these areas, Steve Knight's on the other side. Steve Knight is not protecting our community. And I will be there trying to save lives on day one. It's really, to me, despicable the way our leaders have refused to act, and people refuse to act, and people just keep dying. When it comes to the environment, you know, Congressman Knight, I think, he has a lifetime score of 0% from the League of Conservation Voters. That's almost hard to do. You would think that accidentally one time you'd vote for the environment, but not Congressman Knight. He goes out of his way to make sure he doesn't. So we had the Porter Ranch gas leak here, where 20,000 people had to be relocated. Schools were shut down. Dogs were getting nosebleeds. And Congressman Knight didn't do anything to help people. He hasn't protected the people who dealt with that and combating climate change. I drafted a proposed piece of legislation already, not only dealing with that leak, but the other 400 natural gas storage facilities across the country to make sure leaks like that don't happen in the future. We have better monitoring systems in place. We've got a lot of local issues here, whether it's Santa Susana or Cemex or Whitaker-Burmite, where I don't think Congressman Knight is leading the charge the right way. And he is continuing to provide massive subsidies, vote for massive subsidies to dirty energy companies, while we should be moving into the renewable energy field, that he's not there providing the leadership we need.
How would you be different on Cemex? It seems like it's kind of held up with the Bureau of Land, BLM, Bureau of Land Management. I mean, what would you do differently than Congressman Knight's doing?
Sorry, I wanted to address also just from your primary opposition too, as far as how you differ on those issues, because we just talked about Congressman Knight.
Yeah, look, I am mainly focusing on Congressman Knight on these issues. He is really bad on the environment. He is really bad on guns. That's who I'm focusing on with these issues. I know you're going to hear from the other candidates later. I think that when it comes to the environment and guns, Jess and I are pretty similar. And that I'm really focusing on Congressman Knight when it comes to those.
Right, no, but I just wanted to hear your perspective on how you feel, your views on the differences between you and the candidates and how you kind of explain that to voters.
Well, what I've been doing is fighting these fights for a while. And so when it comes to Aliso Canyon, I've been at Aliso Canyon marching with the people there in the community who've been getting sick. I think I'm the only candidate who have been doing that. I think I'm the only candidate who's written a piece of legislation already addressing that. We had the big Chiquita Canyon dump here, which the expansion was put forward. This was last year, I think March or so, February, March. And there was a hearing in Stevenson Ranch about that expansion. Congressman Knight sent staff there to testify in favor of that dump expansion. I was there testifying against it and standing with the community. I don't believe any of the other candidates were there. And so when it comes to these battles to protect our local environment, I've been doing that for years. I've been standing with the community. I don't think the other candidates have been doing that. When it comes to Cemex specifically, you may remember, it might have been at the Signal debate for the 2016 primary. We had a question about this, and I said, Congressman Knight was celebrating the fact that the BLM under the Obama administration had put a block in place. And I said, look, we need a legislative solution. This isn't enough. The next president can, if we leave it up to the whims of the next president, we have no protection whatsoever. I want a legislative solution. And Congressman Knight laughed at me and said, oh, just like Bryan the lawyer to one another law. Well, then of course we got this president, and what's one of the first things he started to do? Reconsider our protected spaces. And so all of a sudden Congressman Knight came around and said, oh, look at me, I'm trying to push a law forward, which he literally made fun of me for proposing. But the law that he put forward is actually Dianne Feinstein's bill. He wasn't able to get his scored in time. Doesn't go far enough to protect us, to get into the weeds of it. It basically says that no new contracts will be issued, but depending on what this BLM does, and we're still waiting, it could still operate for up to another 20 years, depending on the interpretation. So at best, what Congressman Knight has done is maybe protect us 20 years from now. I want a legislative solution now. I don't want that mine to ever see the light of day, and I want to make sure we put that in law, in fact, so that no matter what the BLM does under this president or the next president, we are protected from having that mine in our backyard.
So are you saying that you would basically introduce that same bill without that clause that says going forward, I mean, tell me what you would do. What
Yeah,
you would introduce.
Yeah, I mean, this was added into an omnibus bill,
Right.
just a provision in there. I want just a clean piece of legislation that says there will be no mining, and just put the exact geographic distinctions in Soledad Canyon. It's not going to open, and you put that there, and you make sure it never opens. And we got close to that before. It didn't happen. This
Right.
representative hasn't pushed that, and so here we are with maybe a solution 20 years from now. I don't want to wait 20 years. And have this president's BLM maybe go the wrong way.
So, the question earlier stated how your votes differ from your opponents in both parties. You did mention Jess, but you did mention Katie. Some potential constituents have been saying that Katie, touting herself as a gun-owning moderate on the issue of gun reform, appeals to those who may be on the fence, who don't know if they're going to vote conservative or liberal. What would you say to those constituents who maybe want to keep their guns? Like, how would you speak directly to them if one were sitting in front of you right now?
Look, I am sick and tired of waking up and reading about another massacre. It makes me sick. And it keeps happening time and time and time again. And I'm really disgusted by the fact that Congress doesn't do anything about it. And the fact that we have the tools to do so. It is perfectly constitutional to keep these dangerous weapons away from dangerous people and start saving lives tomorrow. And this is an issue that I'm going to talk about until I'm blue in the face, because I am sick of people dying. And I've been really inspired by watching the students from Parkland who have kind of taken this issue nationwide. And it has spread, and we have had so many amazing students right here in Santa Clarita, in the Antelope Valley, in Simi, who organized a march, who organized a walkout and a town hall, and listening to some of the speeches from these kids who just want to feel safe when they go to school. It has really inspired me and frustrated me by our failure as adults, as people in office, to get a solution in place. And so I'm going to keep talking about this. There are common sense solutions that I outlined that we could pass tomorrow that are supported by 80, 90% of the population. We just don't have representatives with the willpower to stand up to the corporate gun lobby and start saving lives, and that's wrong. And so we need to get people like that out of office.
Is everybody happy with those answers? Or even if you're not happy. How's the campaign going? I guess you got my sample ballot, but mail-in probably coming today or tomorrow, right? I mean, people are going to start voting. How's it going? I don't see a lot of literature from you.
I'm
declaring, just so everybody knows, I'm a declined state, so I get literature from both sides.
Yeah.
So how's it going?
It is exciting. This year there is so much energy out there. If there is one thing that this president is good for, it is for uniting the nation against him. And so feeling that energy on the ground that just hasn't been there before is a really, it's a fun thing to be a part of. It's also disappointing and scary that the reason people are so motivated is because of what's happening in Washington. But look, we got 6 months to go basically. I spend about every day possible talking to as many voters as possible, spreading our message. We're well over 1,000 volunteers. We've got more labor endorsements than any challenger in the country, dozens of local officials, and are just trying to continue expanding that base to go out there and say, look, it doesn't have to be this way. We don't need to have literally the fourth biggest Trump rubber stamp in the nation representing us. We can get someone who's going to stand up for us, who's going to fight for us, who's going to put our health, our environment, our community first. And it's exciting to see that message resonate.
Back in 2016, the Signal editorial board criticized you for what we felt was you were going negative against Knight, in the general election. Assuming you make it through the primary, will you promise you're not going to go negative and not talk about the issues?
Well, look, we've talked about this a lot, Jason. I felt last year I was talking about the issues, and to me, when all I do is talk about Congressman Knight's votes and quotes, if that is negative, then that tells you all you need to know about his positions. And so what I do promise you is that over the course of this campaign with Congressman Knight, we're going to talk about his votes, his quotes, and my positions, and why I think we can do better as a community. And so when he votes to take people's health care away, I'm going to talk about that. And when he says that he'll never support a single gun control measure no matter how many of our students keep dying, I'm going to talk about that. I think those are critical key issues that voters need to be aware of when they're deciding who do they want to represent this community, who do they want to stand up to Donald Trump on their behalf. So I'm going to talk about those issues. And I think Congressman Knight is going to talk about them on his side as well. He's just on the wrong side of them.
So you will provide us voters of what you would do instead of what he's doing, rather than just being negative and bashing him.
Absolutely.
Moving along.
Just what we talked about here on CMAX, where I have a specific disagreement with what he's doing and think we could do better. On gun safety, where I outlined 5 or 6 things that he should be doing and isn't. When we talk about Aliso Canyon, and I've already written a piece of legislation that he doesn't. When we talk about health care, when he votes to take it away for 57,000 people, I support Medicare for all. I think we got a great program, and we should, it's efficient, it keeps costs down, it has high favorability ratings, and I want to make it available to every person in this country. And so on each one of these issues, there's a real clear divide between Congressman Knight and me, and we're going to talk about those differences. We're going to talk about my values and my vision, and I'm confident that as we do that for the next 6 months, we're gonna get through this in November, and then get down to what this is all about, which is actually representing the community to try and improve things.
How, you and Katie and Jess, all Democrats, how do you feel what are you going to point out if it's you and Knight, what would make you a more superb candidate in pointing out that you have better alternatives than they do?
Look, running for Congress is hard, and I appreciate anyone who's willing to step up and do it. I think on a whole host of issues, I have the skills and experience that we need right now for our country and our community. My experience as a lawyer working for a federal judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where I dealt with immigration cases and criminal justice cases, where as a lawyer I served subpoenas, I put witnesses under oath, I took on banks and insurance companies. That's what we need right now. We need to fix our immigration system, our criminal justice system, our financial system, and have the ability to get in there on these committees and serve those subpoenas and get witnesses in there, uncover this corruption, and start to take our country back. And those are skills and experience that no one else in this race of either party have. Other than me, and I want to take that to represent this community, to make sure we can actually start having a Congress that fulfills its constitutional role of being a check on the executive branch, which simply isn't happening right now.
What would you say to the constituents who are perhaps upset about potential negative campaigning or tension that they detect between you and Katie Hill?
Look, I think that it is wonderful in our democracy to talk about issues, to talk about differences on one party, on another party. This is why we have elections, and to make sure that, Congressman Knight, as you mentioned, is the 4th biggest Trump rubber stamp, actually 5th, he's behind 4, the 5th biggest Trump rubber stamp in America, okay? And that's wrong, it's bad for our community. And we need to have the best possible person who is able to beat him and who is able to take our community in a better direction. And so, not all Democrats are the same. And we can talk about those differences, and we can talk about our vision, and we can talk about our skills, and we can vote on June 5th, and then we can all rally together to see what's happening to our country and our republic is dangerous, and Steve Knight is a part of the problem. And I really think everybody's going to be able to come together after that to say we need to go in a different direction, and it's not happening. And so once we get past June, we're going to have a really united front as people start looking out for the country.
If you weren't the candidate that makes it past the primary, would you still endorse the Democratic candidate? Throw your support behind them?
Look, absolutely. It didn't take Donald Trump being president for me to think Steve Knight was bad for this community. And so on so many issues, he's voting the wrong way. He's assisting Donald Trump tear families apart. He's taken away our health care. He's bad on the environment. He's bad on women's health. On so many of these issues, he's wrong. He shouldn't be in office on January 3rd, 2019. And I'm going to do what I can to make sure that doesn't happen.
So do you have maybe specifics on how you would really want, because as you said, not all Democrats are the same, how would you really pledge to unite the party and potentially heal any tensions after the primary should you win? I'm
going to continue to have the open door policy that I have right now. Everybody is welcome. Everybody who thinks we should go in a different direction than we are now is welcome on our campaign. And that's not just Democrats. That's a lot of decline to state people like Jason. It's a lot of Republicans who are coming up to me after this tax vote who said, you know, I voted for Congressman Knight last time. I was willing to set aside all of his bad social positions because I thought he was going to lower my taxes, and we can, you know, set aside why I think that's a problem to set aside his social issues. But I own a house here. I pay taxes here, and Congressman Knight just really screwed me over. And we've had a lot of people on the Republican side saying that. And so I'm going to continue having, you know, a very, very open tent, big tent for people who believe we can do better than this. And I'm going to continue meeting with people and talking to people and getting in front of every group possible to talk about my message and my vision and why we can do things better.
Let's change gears. You've described President Trump as a threat to national security. How would you envision handling foreign policy differently with respect to national security?
Yeah, look, it just happened today with him pulling out of the Iran deal. We live in dangerous times, and we have enemies that are sophisticated and different than at any time in our history. And it is more important than ever that we have allies, that we cooperate and coordinate with allies, and we do everything possible to work together in order to protect this country. So when you pull out of the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran deal and leave us on an island with our allies thinking we can't be trusted, that we can't be worked with, that diplomacy serves no point because whatever we may have agreed with in a year, 2 years, or 3 years, we're just going to pull out of it, that leaves us weakened. That leaves us more at risk of one of these threats from across the world causing us serious damage. And so I am really opposed to what this president is doing, where he insults our allies and isolates us when we need to be cooperating more than ever.
I mean, how do you repair that then?
By getting rid of this president and by having, you know, we need to have someone at the State Department who believes in diplomacy. We don't have that right now. We need to have advisors who recognize that we are stronger when we cooperate with our allies. And right now we have people in Congress who, and this is the Senate's role, it's not the House's role, but who are confirming these people to be in cabinet positions or other high-level positions who have shown that they're isolationist and have insulted our allies and have put us at risk, and they then elevate them to a position. That's dangerous. We need to provide our oversight role in Congress to conduct detailed hearings, make sure we get those witnesses in there, and we get to the truth for the best possible policies. But it is going to be hard to do so as long as we have this president, who I believe is the greatest threat to national security facing America. And so that's why the role of Congress, holding him accountable and making sure that he can't just shred the Constitution and break the law, is so important right now at this point in our country.
But, okay, say you win. Trump's going to be in office for 2 more years. Say the House does not go shift to the Democrats. What are you going to do as the lone guy from the, well, you'll definitely have a Democratic delegation to work with in California, but I mean, that could happen, right?
Absolutely.
What are you going to do?
Look,
as one freshman congressman going in there on foreign policy issues and matters of defense.
We'll just talk about everything as a whole. I certainly hope, I think this Republican Party has taken us in the wrong way. I hope there are 23 seats that flip so Democrats take the majority. But even without that, on a lot of these issues, it's not straight party line. You know, on this, I think, terrible tax bill, the Republicans in New York and New Jersey voted against it because they realized this was an attack on blue states that have state income taxes. Now, Congressman Knight didn't. He sided with Republicans and rubber stamped it. But so even just changing a few seats can make it go the other way. On the health care bill, on Trump care, although Republicans have a 50-seat majority, you know, that only passed by 3-4 votes. So even just taking a few seats away from these extremists can lead to much better outcomes for our community. So you don't need to take back House in order to block some of the real damaging things they're trying to do. But I have, you know, no false ideas. I'm going to go in there and be one of 435. And I'm going to provide my constitutional role. I'm going to go to the committee hearings. I'm going to ask my questions. And I'm going to try to get the best results possible for the community. And sometimes I'm going to be on the minority side of that. But I also think there's enough common ground. I think there are enough people who still love this country, both parties in office who are scared about what this president is doing and who want to protect this country from threats. And I think there is enough common ground there that if you do your role at the committees, that you can protect the country better than it is right now.
Let's talk about the nuances of perhaps you and the Democratic Party. We've heard a lot of criticism of Congressman Knight and the Republican Party, but is there anywhere that you disagree with the Democratic Party on in terms of policy?
Sure, absolutely, on a whole host of issues. You know, we just had one, I don't know, now it's a couple weeks ago. The type of work I did as an attorney, it was against banks, it was against insurance companies, it was after the financial collapse. And I really saw how these financial institutions caused the global economic collapse. And so in response to that, the Dodd-Frank bill went forward. I didn't think that was strong enough, but it provided some safeguards in place. And we haven't had another economic collapse since then. And just a few weeks ago, the Senate, including, I don't remember the number, 15 or so Democrats, voted to roll back those already very limited Dodd-Frank protections. That makes no sense whatsoever, and it's particularly bad for this community in the 25th District. Palmdale was known as the foreclosure capital of California. It hit us really hard. And so there were a bunch of Democrats, all the Republicans, but also a significant number of Democrats who put our financial system at risk so that they could, you know, give a windfall to big banks. I think that's wrong. When it comes to immigration, DACA is an issue near and dear to my heart. And we have, as I said, 5,000 DACA eligible people in this congressional district. This president has threatened to tear those families apart. This president set an arbitrary March 5th deadline. Now that came and went because the Supreme Court said no, it can't take effect just yet. I was hoping we would already have a solution to DACA, that we would get a Clean Dream Act through. We don't have that because the Democrats, or many of the Democrats in Congress, didn't use the leverage they had in order to make sure we got that solution.
What was the leverage they had?
So as it was coming up to fund the government, because the Republican Party is so dysfunctional right now in Congress, even though they have a 50-seat majority, Paul Ryan couldn't get a majority to vote for a budget, and so they needed Democratic votes. So that was our opportunity as a party to say, look, we are going to hold these. Some of these values are so fundamental, strengthening our community, keeping families together, that we're not going to just give away votes for nothing. You need to protect these families. And they didn't do that. And I think that was wrong and a missed opportunity from a bunch of Democrats. And so not everybody of all parties is the same. And you got to look at where people stand on the issues and who's actually going to share your values and be there with you.
But there's always a risk if it's, you know, Democrats are stuck their heels in the ground on DACA and stuff, to come across as obstructionist and part of the problem and all that stuff.
Sure. Look.
Where do you draw the line on that?
There are some issues that have to be so fundamental to your values that you stand strong. And to me, tearing families in our community apart is one of those things. And when Republicans have a 50-seat majority and can't get stuff done, that's not because of Democratic obstructionism. It's because they're a dysfunctional party who is so extreme that they can't get policies through because even members of their own party see that they're destroying this country.
You've cited you've cited Medicare as a priority of yours. What are your views on that and making it sustainable and going forward?
Yeah, so there are kind of two issues there. One is just the Medicare system we have right now for people 65 and older. We need to protect that and preserve that, and it's a threat under this administration and with this Congress. What I've talked about is Medicare for All, where I want to take this program and I want to expand it and make it available to every person in our community and our country. And the evidence is pretty darn clear that Medicare keeps costs down, that it is more efficient, that you can, you know, when the government can negotiate federal prescription drug prices, it would save us $880 billion over 10 years. Because right now the pharmaceutical companies are just getting rich while parents are deciding whether to buy medicine or feed their children. So when you have this system and expand it out, the numbers are that it would save $17 trillion over 10 years. From our current health system, we would save $17 trillion. We don't, because there is too much money on the other side to have the broken healthcare system that we have right now. And that's just wrong. We have the ability to provide high quality care to every person in our country, and I'm going to fight for it.
it kind of fits into the whole cost of living puzzle. Minimum wage is another piece of that. How would you, or how could you support small business and satisfy the Californians that want a higher minimum wage? What's that balancing act look like? What do you feel like is the right answer?
Look, I support a national living wage. Nobody should be working 2 or 3 jobs and still be in poverty. And that's frankly the situation we have right now. Wages have not kept up over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And it's a problem, and there are a lot of people who are struggling to get by. And to me, this is about priorities. And right now, what they're doing in Congress is they really prioritize those massive companies, those massive corporations, those massive banks, and they're not helping out the small businesses, which are responsible for something like 99% of the jobs in this country. And so it's about shifting those priorities. We do well here, but you know, the Small Business Development Center could have more resources and more training to help the local businesses cut through the red tape to start or to expand. I'm a big proponent in improving the broadband internet access that we have. Here in Santa Clarita it's particularly bad. In the Antelope Valley it's particularly bad. Simi Valley it's bad. There are resources available at the federal level to help get that investment at the local level, to expand that. That makes it more likely that jobs are going to locate here, because you have a bunch of new small businesses who don't start up here. They go down to Silicon Beach, which is way more expensive, because they've got really high broadband internet. Well, that's a problem, and it's a solvable problem. And so if we were able to shift those resources here, that can help new businesses open. That can make it so people don't have to spend an hour or 2 commuting each way every day down below, because that's where the jobs were. And it can really help the small businesses thrive, help the quality of life for the people who live here. And so it's just one after the other that improves things.
Well, what do you think the minimum wage, national minimum wage should be?
Look, I support a $15 minimum wage, but I think we need to have a national wage that is going to allow people to live with a quality of life where they're not in poverty. And that's a problem. And so you have some of the local areas that are taking a lead. And so here's a big problem that I have with Congressman Knight, because he voted against it at the federal level. And he said, no, I can't do it because, I forget what state he used, Texas or Oklahoma or whatever. California has made its decision. California has set its minimum wage, right? And we're on a path. When Congressman Knight votes to let another state have a lower minimum of wage, that makes it less competitive in California. Every person he represents is in the state of California. That's my problem with his tax vote. Maybe the tax vote was good for Oklahoma. I don't know. I still think it was a problem with bad priorities. But he doesn't represent people in Oklahoma. And he doesn't represent small businesses in Oklahoma. He represents the 25th District of California. And so when he votes for policies that hurt us here, that's wrong, and that's not looking out for us.
But having a $15 minimum wage in Oklahoma or Arkansas, I started my career many years ago in Arkansas. It was dirt cheap, but I was making dirt wages. But there was no way businesses in Arkansas or Oklahoma would be able to support a $15 minimum wage. So, yeah, you're representing us, but you just want to throw your vote away. I mean, it's not going to pass.
Well, I certainly don't think it's throwing your vote away. I think it's fighting for something that will improve the quality of life for millions of Americans and be good for our community. And the reason it didn't pass is because you have extremists like Steve Knight in office who refuse to let it pass. So we need to change the people in office, people who believe in a national living wage, people who believe that there should be a quality of life and all of the money shouldn't go to a smaller and smaller sliver. But we should actually start looking out for the community as a whole. And that's not happening right now. And it could happen if we shifted our priorities and if we got people in office who cared about that.
But you would get no support by a lot of people, Congress people from a lot of other states in those Arkansas type places, right?
Look, there are very few things that pass in Congress with 435 votes. It's usually naming post offices and maybe a waterfall. So it's pretty rare for you to get 435 votes, but there are enough. There are enough people who believe in improving lives that, and we can get there. We just need to get the obstructionists out. And so that's the problem right now, that we have obstructionists in there. There's no doubt, I'm with you. There are extreme people in office who are preventing progress in this country. And I'm trying to do something about that one seat that I can.
So Bryan, in line with the idea that there will always be, to a degree, the obstructionists on the other side of the aisle in Congress, no matter what would you say is your biggest strategy for working across the aisle to pass legislation with obstructionist, quote, people who are hardballing against your values?
Yeah, and I'll just say, look, I think people agree on way more than they disagree. You watch the talking heads on TV, you'd think everyone hates each other. You listen to the leaders of each party, you'd think everyone hates each other. I spend a lot of time talking to people on the other side of the aisle throughout this community. I had a parade in Leona Valley, which is a conservative part of this district, talking to mainly Republicans. And when I talk to people, just talk, we agree on a whole lot. We all want a safe place to live. We want a good school where our kids have an opportunity to get ahead, and air we can breathe, water we can drink, and we agree on a whole lot of stuff. And I think that's true across the country. And I think we can't let those small differences we have prevent any progress. And there's a lot of room for common ground. And both parties keep talking about this $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion infrastructure bill. Well, they've been talking about it for a long time, but I'd like to have a seat at the table on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee to make sure, if we can get that through, that we're going to get those resources right here to improve quality of life. Gun control, which we just talked about. These are issues that 80, 90% of Americans agree on. That they're sick like I am of people dying, and 80% of people are on the same page. We should be able to get something done. DACA and the Clean Dream Act. 60, 70, 80% of Americans agree that DACA recipients who are American in every sense of the term, they just need a piece of paper, and we agree on that. I hope that's already solved before I got there. We had a March 5th deadline. I hope we get that before I'm there, but if not, there should be some real room for progress there. So there's always going to be disagreements, but on some of these big picture items that are just good for people's lives, I'm confident we can make something get done.
Yeah, so what's your actual strategy in terms of actions? Would you want to corral people around this philosophy and really promote that, or how are you going to put that into action when talking to those legislators that you may really disagree with?
Absolutely. Look, you're going to get in office. I'm not going to know any of these people, and you're going to start building relationships and having conversations and talking about common sense. I talked about broadband internet. That shouldn't be a political issue. And I know that the 25th District of California is not the only district in America that doesn't have great broadband access. And a lot of the places that don't have it are probably represented by Republicans. So I'm going to look into that, find the data, and go talk to Republicans who represent some of those districts and say, look, this is something that can be good for your local community, and it's not partisan, and let's focus on this. So you have those conversations, you get the evidence, and you realize that we only move forward as a country when we're working together, and I think there's enough we can find the solutions on.
So maybe you vote for the soybean bill for some guy from Oklahoma that will in turn vote on your stuff. I'm being serious here. I mean, it's a little bit of horse trading that goes on.
I'd have to know what was in that soybean bill. But look, you get to Congress, it is complicated issues, and not all of them have to do specifically with the 25th District. And you need to look at every single one of them as a whole and try to get the best possible outcome for our community. And that is always what I'm going to be doing. And especially when they make these big giant omnibus bills that have some good stuff in it, some bad stuff in it, you're going to have to trust that the person representing you is going to read it, is going to learn about it to the extent possible and study it, and then you understand that person's values and where they're coming from, and that they're going to make the right decision. And that's the commitment I make, that I'm always going to consider all the facts. I'm always going to do as much research as possible. And I'm going to vote my conscience in the best way that's going to help the community.
So this time around, the fundraising race has been much more competitive. What has been your primary strategy to work around that, and how might it differ from last election?
Frankly, I spend my time thinking about how to talk to voters, and that's really what I focus on. And that's, the way campaign finance is done in this country is a disgrace. We need to have publicly financed campaigns. We need to get a constitutional amendment overturning Citizens United, because the amount of outside spending is truly obscene, and it corrupts our democracy, and I think it is a massive problem. And so I want to get all that money out because it prevents our democracy from flourishing the way it should. And so what I'm trying to do is spread my message to every person I can talking about what we want to do on campaign finance and other issues, and reach as many voters as possible from now. Been doing it for a year, and we'll hopefully do it for the next 6 months. And every person we talk to, it's not so much about convincing them to vote for us. Our message is the right message. People are not happy with Congressman Knight. You can't be. He literally is the 5th biggest Trump rubber stamp in America. People don't agree with him. They just need to know where I stand and where he stands. And so I spend every single day talking to more voters and trying to spread that message.
What are you getting as to, you say people don't agree with him? Well, probably, I don't know, I'm not going to go out on the line. It's the percentage of people in Santa Clarita that do agree with him and will be at City Hall tonight. And then there are people in the other districts. I know Simi Valley is pretty conservative. AV, not so. I mean, you're almost kind of 50-50 here. Sure. I mean, so how do you win?
By
50% of the people vote for him, and they heard of him because Knight, his name's been there for a zillion years with his dad and stuff. And yeah, it's your second time around, but you're still not that well known.
In the same way that we're not going to get 435 votes on most things other than post offices in Congress, we're not going to get 100% of the vote here. But when I talk about the people aren't with them, I mean the majority. And it's really clear. On health care, voting to take health care away from 57,000 people in this community is so wrong and so out of touch with this community. And I talk to so many people whose lives are at stake because of it, and on immigration and on the environment, on literally every issue. He's in the minority. When it comes to guns, I mean, he's in the minority, and people just don't know where he stands on it, but they are now waking up to it. And that's why he stopped holding town halls. But when he did them, he was getting 500, 600, 800 people to come out. It's why there are protests every week outside of his office, and instead of talking to his constituents, he pulls down the blinds, locks the door, and calls the sheriff's department right away. That is not what a representative does, and it's not what a representative does when he believes he's on the side of the people. You don't do that when you think you're right. You do that when you know you're wrong and you're scared to confront the people you're supposed to represent. And that's what's really a shame about what he's doing right now.
Well, so our last question is going to be, what is your favorite place to eat in Santa Clarita and why?
Whew. You know, there have been a lot of really good places that have been opening. I think that my favorite place right now is probably Newhall Refinery. I really, really enjoy going there. The macaroni and cheese is maybe my favorite macaroni and cheese of all macaroni and cheeses. I frequently, my wife Lisa and I will split a burger in the macaroni and cheese, and it's a fabulous, wonderful meal with a lot of good beer options.
You don't worry about cholesterol.
You know, my favorite restaurant as a whole in the district is Grizzly Burger, which is, you're driving up the 14 between Santa Clarita and the AV, and anytime I'm driving between the two places around lunchtime, I pull off for my Grizzly Burger. Don't tell my wife. And so, yes, campaigns are not the healthiest eating situations, but Newhall Refinery is great. And then you eat there, and I walk right down the street to the Pagter Winery. That was Double Trouble with Hoi Polloi there too. Love their wine. Love sitting out there in an evening in their back patio. And so it's a lot of good places to choose from.
Journalism isn't all that conducive to healthy eating.
Probably not.
No, well, I think that pretty much wraps up our time. It's been a little over a half an hour, but thank you, Bryan, for answering our questions and addressing some of the issues that have been brought to us from your potential constituents and through our discussions.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Bryan.
It's
All
great
right.
talking to you, Bryan.
Yeah.